Hi, this is Jennifer Corey with the Heart Initiative, and I want to welcome you to our second session on Living with Heart. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Dan Tomasulo about hope. Let me tell you a little bit about who Dan is first. Dan is a dear friend of mine who is also a psychologist with 25 years in practice, maybe even more, I don't know. That might be a little shy.
Yeah.
25 years in practice, but he's also a professor at Columbia University, the Spirituality Mind-Body Program Center there. And he's an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania under Martin Seligman, who is the father of Applied Positive Psychology and the master of Applied Positive Psychology program. In addition to that, Dan is a prolific writer. He has a couple of thousand articles to his name, and he also has 5 books, including American Snake Pit and Confessions of a Former Child, and a forthcoming book on hope. It's actually called Learned Hopefulness, The Power of Positivity to Overcome Depression. And that is due out in June of this year. And I can't think of a better time, a better topic, and certainly a better person to speak to as we're facing the challenges of COVID-19 to help us talk about what role hope can play in the midst of all this. So Dan, welcome.
Well, thank you for your gracious introduction, Jen. It's really, really terrific to have this opportunity, and particularly with you and your Heart Initiative. You've done so much good work already, and this is just another example of that.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that so much. And again, I think the timing of this and the timing of your book coming out is absolutely amazing. I've had a chance to catch some of the preview, not the preview, but the early comments on the book. I'm using the wrong word, I know.
The reviews.
The
Yeah.
reviews, that's what I mean to say, the early reviews, and they are absolutely amazing. They are amazing, and coming from, just some of the most well-respected thought leaders and writers and researchers. So this book is going to be absolutely phenomenal. And I appreciate, especially now, your expertise and your thinking on the topic of hope. And I thought maybe we could start with just this definition of what is hope? We all use the word, but what do we really mean when we're talking about and defining hope?
Well, it's a good question because hope gets mingled up with a lot of different terms like faith, and we sort of use it interchangeably. But in the science world, it's really about your expectation of what you can control in the future. So that makes it a little bit more specific. And as we start to study hope, we also get to see that it's tethered to our belief that we can have an influence in the future. So hope is about the belief that we can have an impact or an influence over tomorrow.
And Dan, are we all born with this innate sense of hope? And is hope one of those things that there's a limited amount of, or is it something that is self-generating? And what activates hope?
Well, it would be like saying, are we born with, muscles? The answer is yes, but it also depends on how we use them and develop them. So we all have the capacity for hope, but the degree to which we nourish it and make it flourish is really an individual thing. One of the things that came from doing the research for the book is finding out that hope isn't something you either have or you don't, because a lot of people think it. They think the circumstance causes it or something else. It's innate. But the truth of the matter is we have the capacity for it, but we also have the capacity to cultivate it. And that's really what the book is about. Learned Hopefulness is about how do we cultivate this expectation and our belief that we can influence or control the future.
That's such a fascinating piece, that we have this capacity to cultivate it, because I'm guessing that most people think it's fixed. You're born with a certain amount of hope or a certain way of seeing the world that either leads you to be more or less hopeful. And so would you say a little bit about some of the research that you've found about this cultivation of hope?
Yeah, one of the things about hope, it's the only positive emotion that requires negativity or uncertainty in order to be activated. So, if you think about any of the other positive emotions, things like gratitude or bliss or awe, you don't need a negative element to activate it. So hope stands alone, and the Greeks knew this when Pandora opened her jar. The only thing she kept in the jar, she closed it before hope escaped. So there's something about that mythology that actually rings true to science, that hope lived amongst all the evils and all the difficulties. And so it knows them very well. But it's not really activated until something uncertain or something negative comes into our life. And well, we certainly seem to have the uncertainty part going now.
So, would you say something about the difference, especially because you called it learned hopefulness? What is the difference between people for whom a struggle or a difficulty activates that hopefulness versus people who feel hopeless? Because I'm going to guess, and by the way, can you experience both?
Mhm.
I'm going to guess that people are probably experiencing, we probably have a wide mix of what that looks like in our culture right now.
Sure, sure. Um, if you were to take a seesaw that's on a balance point of some kind, right? And let's say it's even, and we said that that seesaw is hope, right? If you get some negativity, negativity is like a pebble on one side. So it's going to tip that scale to the side of the pebble. And the question is, what do we need to do to tip the scale back the other way? Well, one of the things we know about positive emotions is that they're not quite as strong as negative emotions for reasons of survival. Negative emotions kept us alive. So that's why when we see the worry that's going on, and people being a little bit panicked and fearful, it's because these emotions have kept us as a species alive. And so they get snapped in pretty quickly. And once they do, they're like putting pebbles on that side of the seesaw. But to balance it out, you need feathers, and because the positive emotions are like the feathers. And the question is, can feathers actually balance out pebbles? The answer is yes, but you need a lot of them. So that's why, I've been invested in a lot of people in the positive psychology world. I've been invested in talking about keeping a positive attitude and looking for good things, because every time you can acknowledge it, it becomes another feather on that side of the scale. And then something beautiful really does happen. 10 years ago, I was kind of flipped the other way, with more pebbles and feathers. But over time, as you start to make that change and the scale tips, what happens is the pebbles don't stay on there in the same way. First of all, they sort of roll off. And second of all, it becomes easier to keep that side going in that direction. So hope is something that can be cultivated, but it's not going to be one big thing that does it. It's not going to be the big job or the wedding or the relationship or the money. It's going to be literally adding as many percepts, as many feathers as possible onto that side of the scale.
So it sounds like hope is a positive emotion that then gets nourished
Yes.
by other positive emotions.
Yeah. In the book in Learned Hopefulness, I have I've organized a theory based on all the other theories. I thought I saw this great picture of the adage that it's like three blind men holding the elephant, and they each describe it in different ways. So I got a cartoon of six scientists holding an elephant, and I put the word hope on it because they're all right. I don't think that you could say that any of the former theories of hope are incorrect at all. I just think that they all had a piece of something bigger. So I call it the hierarchy of hope. And so there seem to be some layers in terms of needing to find resources when something uncertain or negative happens. And then from the resources, we get some support. And then from the support, we change our perception. And from the perception, we change our calibration of how we look at things. And as that happens, we start planning what I call micro goals and have a pathway, an agency. That was one of the theories, but it was like the tip of the iceberg. But ultimately, what happens at the very, very tip of that pyramid in the hierarchy of hope, you have what's called high hope, which means that you're very readily going through these stages, and instead of saying to yourself, "What now?" you start saying, "What's next? What else can I do next?" That generates this feeling of hope.
Mm. Wow, I love that. I love the high hope. I think right away of the song.
I know.
We
Uh,
break into.
I'll tell you a quick funny story. I had been working on this for a while, and really trying, getting to get a publisher and get the idea and reading all the research. And I had gone to sleep one night, and I had asked. I said, "Please, give me a title for this thing. I need a title." And I went to sleep, and in the middle of the night, I woke up, and I had this image, large image. It was over on this side of my head, of an ant, and I knew right away what the answer was. This is a theory of high hope. And I woke up humming the song, and I was like, "Oh, I get it now."
Yeah, yeah. Dan, I think that people are facing some really scary and uncertain times right now. And I'm wondering if some people are listening to us talk about hope and thinking, well, I'm just low in hope. That's all there is to it. Or this circumstance has overwhelmed my sense of hope. I think of it in terms of, because my area is to really teach about all of the elements that go into resilience.
Sure.
Hope being the first one. The Heart Initiative stands for hope, engagement, action, resources, and thriving.
Right.
But we always start with hope because it's the tipping point. But I can imagine that somebody might be listening to us and thinking, well, I'm screwed because I'm just not somebody who has high hope right now. What I have is a lot of fear. Maybe I have some despair, a lot of projecting, but I don't feel like I have a lot of hope. I have two questions about that. One is,
Yeah.
are there specific strategies? Are there things that we could offer people today that would say, right here, right now, this is how we can begin hope? It's as near as your next thought or your next breath or your next move.
Sure.
And the second is,
That's been
does it create a bit of an I don't know if antidote is the right word, but a buffer to anxiety and depression? So those are the two questions rolled into.
Yeah. Let me see if I can sort of take them apart a little bit, because the first part of that question, I think, is really important. And the second part of that is, the answer is yes. But let me just back up and do the first part. Um, I want to go back to the definition of hope that I offered in the beginning, and why this is so important. The very first part of this is, the belief that you can control something in the future, right? Or the belief that you can influence the future. So it's pretty simple. And so all of those elements have relevance for hope. So as an example, one of the things that's happening now, because so many people are on quarantine or mandatory staying home, social distancing, and so this is different than a snow day. This is not something where it's going to have a beginning, middle, and end that we know. We don't know about the timeline for this, right? So if all that's true, then the question is, everything that we normally think about that we can control, time we're going to get up, when we're going to get to work, what we're going to do, basic plans for the day, all that's gone. And all of that is gone in a way where we don't know how long it's going to be gone for. So the uncertainty part is the activator. And that's really important because with negative emotions, that they stimulate us very quickly because of the survival thing. Hope is tethered directly to that. Like, in other words, it gets activated right along with everything else. So it's not like there's anything else that has to happen. We're already activated with it. So the first thing I would say is anything that you can do that would give you a sense of control over the next few minutes, over the next hour, over the next half day, over the next day, over the next couple of days, anything that allows you to start getting some influence in the future, start nudging on your agenda. And the biggest thing for people now, they don't have to go to work, they're working remotely, the kids are home. Somebody the other day said, I looked up and I realized that my office mate was an 11-year-old. It's all of a sudden you're working from home, the kids are there like that. So it looks like, there's a lot happening that you don't have control over. But the thing I'm recommending the most is have a schedule. Have your schedule for tomorrow. I'm getting up at 7. I'm doing my exercise. If I haven't started meditating, now's the time. And if I am meditating, now's the time to lengthen it. I've lengthened my meditation practice. I know many people who are long-term meditators are doing that, or they're adding another type of practice. This is the time to start making plans for what you can control in the immediate future. So that's the first thing that I would say. And then the second thing I would say is that in the middle of all this that's going on, there's still a lot of beautiful things happening. I was just out back and looked at the sunset. It was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And to ignore that because of something else, that we're missing an opportunity to get a few feathers on this side. And to not just glance at it and give it a nod, take a moment to take it in, because it's the savoring of what's already good that stretches it out. Then the next thing I would say, so I have these 4 recommendations, right? I would certainly do anything that has to do with planning for having some control in the future. And for most people, that's having a schedule. Savoring, so that you extend the good stuff. The next thing I would talk about is calibrating. And what I mean by that is people think that hope is an on and off thing. You either have it or you don't. But what we've learned is that you can calibrate it. If you thought, I'm going to make $50,000 this year, and now all of this gets jostled around, and you realize, I can't do this, I can't do that. Instead of having to spare because you're not going to hit that goal, well, it might be 40,000. Calibrating the goal that you're working toward allows you to get motivated again. And that's essential, because calibration is really the key to understanding how our motivation gets kicked back in for hope. And then the fourth thing that I'd say is this sounds lopsided, but make sure you have alone time. I understand with social distancing, we're getting messages from every corner of the world not to get too close to people. So at the same time, it would seem crazy to say, make sure that you have alone time, but alone time is different. Alone time is time where you have an intention to be in a contemplative space, to just have time to read, or listen to music, or detach for a while. There's a lot of things that are going on that will demand our attention, including the people that we're in sort of lockdown with, or in quarantine with. So making sure that you have your own private space for your own spiritual connection and emotional connection will be real important.
Wow, I love those 4 suggestions. They're absolutely wonderful. When you talked about the piece about having some control in the future. This being the definition of hope. It made me realize, and correct me please if I'm wrong, that hope in some ways is having some faith in yourself, that there's
Hmm.
something that you can do,
Hmm.
and thereby not having all of your well-being dependent on something other than yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a part that gets into really the core of the book. Um, One of the things that I've learned from looking at all the theories and looking at the research was this idea that a hope is never further away than your next thought. And what I mean by that is that if you're noticing that your thinking and your belief system and your thoughts are systematically running negative, and you notice them, but don't change them. The decision not to change is a choice to remain the same. So that's really important because a lot of people have a negative loop going on, and then they'll be aware of it, but they just kind of shrug their shoulders. But that shrug is basically you making a decision to let those thoughts continue. So I'll be very blunt with folks. It's like if you're immersed in the negativity and then you're watching more and more TV news. I'm not against the news, but take it in small bites. Don't park yourself in front of it for a couple of hours because you're gonna ruminate. And then when you see those thoughts, you're not gonna think you can change them. But the truth is, you're making a decision to remain with them. Get up, change the channel, change what you're doing, where you're going, go for a walk. I took a long walk. I live near the ocean, so I took a walk down on the boardwalk today, and it was absolutely lovely. And I'm as worried about this as the next person, but for a good solid hour, I was in a very different place because everything around me reminded me of something hopeful or positive, rather than sitting in front of the news where most of what I'm being exposed to, I can't do much about right away.
I've asked my the people in our community to limit the news to two 15-minute segments, one in the morning, one at night.
Yes.
That everything I promise you that you will need to know about this, you will be able to get from those two periods.
Yep.
So different than, this constant anxious going back to the phone again and again and again to check in. And that really is right. That's that mammalian brain that wants to say, I should check again, or maybe there's more information, or maybe something more
Sure.
dangerous is happening. So we
Right.
really have to override that instinct,
Yes.
um, and not surrender to the opportunity to be flooded all day long with this, which must be like boulders on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so that's a really good point to come back to that metaphor, because keeping a pebble or a boulder off that side has tremendous value. It has the value of 1,000 feathers. So, keep that in mind too, that if you're trying to keep this balance in your life, keeping something off of this side by not excessively worried, that doesn't mean don't care. Positive psychology very often gets a bad rap, that we just don't want people to have negative thoughts. Listen, if I'm driving and the gates are coming down, it's not a good time for me to have optimism about getting across the railroad tracks, or the sign says thin ice. Not a good time for that to have my negative thoughts pushed away. We really want to honor negativity because it has kept us alive, but immersing in it in a regular way without pause for thought, doesn't become productive, because then we can't function either. We're so drained from that, we can't do the things that we need to do.
So I love that. What you keep off is every bit as important as what you put on
Right.
in to create that balance. What a good reminder, because it allows us then to have control on both sides, which I think to the degree that we can is really important.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. I have three questions that I ask everybody that I interview at the end, and here they are for you. What is one of your own best well-being practices?
I think for me in the morning, I used to get up like Wile E. Coyote, bouncing out of bed and just bing, I was gone and doing a million different things. I do not do that now. I savor waking up. And I do a rather quick assessment of where my mind is at. So there's some dispositional mindfulness that happens right at the moment of wakefulness. And if I wake up and I'm in a really grumpy, grouchy, negative mood, um, one of the things that I'll do is I'll do a particular meditation. It's a modified version of Tonglen. It's actually something that we're doing research on, but it's a very brief meditation to kind of move through the negativity so I'm not immersed in it. And if I wake up and I'm feeling like neutral or in a good enough place, I'll do a gratitude review of the day before. Three things that I have gratitude for. And if I wake up and I'm feeling particularly good, I'll do the very front end of a loving kindness meditation, which is imagining the people I love and my dear friends that are in my life. And I hold them in my heart for just a couple of minutes. So I feel like those three tools in the morning are extremely helpful for me getting ready for the day.
Mm. So you led us beautifully. What a wonderful segue into my next question, which is, would you tell us one thing that you are the most grateful for today?
Well, I spent time FaceTiming today with my grandson, Callahan Thomas Fetro, who is up in New Hampshire with my daughter and son-in-law, Devin and Spencer. And they are happy as clams. They are really, truly, isolated up there, and they are loving it. They are a very young family. Callahan was born in June. And just to see he tried to eat, we're FaceTime, he tried to eat the phone today. And I took pictures of that. So we'd see his mouth and his cavity. He's like, hey, it looks like grandpa. So and there were some things about that I think are very cool because children, are living proof of hope, right? So actually, something they don't even know yet. So the book is due out June 1st, but I've dedicated the book to Callahan. So that's a lovely thing for me.
And I think that idea of we can all land our eyes on children right now. Remember, they are living proof of hope. That's beautiful. It's just pure prose.
Yeah.
And the last question, and again, you segue so beautifully. Thank you. Which is, given the circumstances, exactly as they are right here, right now, in this time in our lives, what do you hope for now?
What a great question. Um, uh, certainly I hope for greater healing and peace in the world. But a little more directly, I'm hoping that each person can contribute their true self in a way that lends toward that end, that each person kind of finds out what their contribution can be and offers that. So that collectively, we've never had this in the history of the human race. We've never had this layer of communication. We've never had this layer of concern about survival. We've never had this much kindness. I took a walk down the street today, and there are 30 people walking outside. Every single person said hello. And I live in New Jersey, so we don't really do that. We're like, hey, But it's just so lovely. So, my hope is that we use everything that's happening as an opportunity for each of us to grow toward our natural skills and gifts that we can give each other.
Oh, Dan Tomasulo, we have known each other for almost 30 years, and I never, never spend time with you, especially in this kind of a conversation where I don't both learn and leave enriched. And I cannot thank you enough for what you've offered your time in what I know is a really busy time for you in your practice and in the work that you're doing. But to share this message of hope for not just the heart community, but for the world. I thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're so welcome. And Jen, right back at you, by the way. If people don't know it, it's our relationships that are the number one thing for our well-being. And you are certainly part of that for me. So thank you so much for asking me.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Dan's book and some contact information, if you'd like to know more about his work, if you'd like to see more of his articles, you're going to see as this video comes to an end. And I can't encourage you enough to get his book, pre-order it, because I know it's going to sell out and it's coming out on June 1st. So get your orders in. Dan, thank you again so much, my friend.
Thank you, Jen.